author, speaker, mother, and radio host. It's Jennifer Fulwiler. And we're back on the Catholic Channel.
Well, it's about time.
SiriusXM 129.
Jen Fulwiler, so excited to be joining you here this afternoon. And, during the break, I pulled up Spotify, and I was just adding all of this stuff to my Spotify playlist because as soon as I get off the air, I am running to Newark Airport, or more like sitting in traffic in an Uber, and heading back to Austin, Texas. So I've got a long flight, 3-hour direct flight. And so I'm adding all of this music that we just talked about during Jen's Jukebox to my playlist. So excited about that. I really, really appreciate all your calls. We'll definitely do it again next Friday. And right now I am so excited to talk to Sean Salai. He is a contributor to America Magazine. Of course, we've got the America Magazine show here on the Catholic Channel on Wednesdays, so you can check that out. And he put together this great book. Love the concept behind this book. It's called All the Pope's Saints, and it's a look at the different saints that have inspired Pope Francis. And, I was just talking about this at dinner the other night, that Pope Francis is a little bit of an enigma, I think, to all of us. Even those of us who love him, he is not an entirely easy guy to understand. And I think I really like this concept. This is a great way to understand who Pope Francis is in a really accessible way by looking at who inspired him. So I love this concept, really excited to talk about it. And Sean, welcome to the Jennifer Fulwiler Show.
Hi, Jen. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and Sean, by the way, my producer and I were going back and forth during the break. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Is it Salai?
It is Salai.
Salai. Yep. Okay, so Salai. People can look you up on Amazon and find your great book, Barnes & Noble, wherever they buy their books. And so, tell me about how this book came about. Again, I love the concept behind it.
Sure. Well, I'm a Jesuit myself. I'm a transitional deacon, and I'll be ordained a priest in June. And a lot of people do find Pope Francis a bit of an enigma. What makes him tick? As a Jesuit, I understand him, but other people don't. So what we wanted to do with this book was introduce Ignatian spirituality, sort of the relationship with God, the way of relating to God that Jesuits have and that Pope Francis has, but to do it in a little bit of a different way. A lot of people, when they want to learn a new skill like prayer, there's one of two ways they go about it. One is they get the instruction manual, and they read the instruction manual, and they get all the principles and concepts. And then they try to build something from the instruction manual. And a lot of spirituality books do that. They're basically a glossary of terms and phrases and a lot of jargon. And there are some people who are specialists who can do that. But with this book, what we wanted to do was say, what if I'm not an expert? What if I just want to learn by watching somebody else do it? And that's the second way a lot of people learn a new skill, is they have somebody build it in front of them. And so with this book, we're looking at how did the Jesuit saints live? What are the principles or the sort of virtues that inspire them? What is it about their way of living that informs the way Francis lives? So we're hoping that this book is a little bit more of a practical dive into kind of learning by doing rather than learning by glossary or learning by dictionary.
I really like that concept. And one of the things you did in this book, Sean, that I like is you bring in your own story to this, which I think is, for those of us who aren't quite as familiar with the Jesuit order and what that means, that Pope Francis is a Jesuit, that you are a Jesuit. And, I'm a convert from atheism, so I didn't grow up understanding the differences between the different forms of Catholic spirituality and the different orders. So it was very interesting to me, for example, to read where you talk about how you were a newspaper reporter, and it required a great amount of trust to leave that behind and enter the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And so I think that was, did you wrestle with how much of your own story to bring into the book, or how did you come to that decision to share, some personal aspects of your own journey?
Well, it felt fairly seamless. Talking about the saints is something that we can all relate to. So in terms of learning by relationship, Jesuits tend to pray with our imagination. So we'll imagine ourselves present with Jesus in the gospel scene. Or in the case of St. Ignatius, the Jesuit founder, after he was wounded in a battle with a cannonball in Pamplona in 1521, he would imagine himself talking with St. Francis of Assisi or St. Dominic. And so for me, it's all part of one sort of continuum, the relationship I have with other people, the relationship I have with God, the relationship I have with St. Ignatius or St. Francis Xavier. And so it's very easy to bring myself into it and sort of say, well, what do the saints mean to me personally? Who are the saints who have shaped me? You know, what's my confirmation name? And very simple things like that I talk about in the book.
Yeah, I love that. Like I said, I think it really helped me as a reader connect with the book, and it's great. Obviously, it's the book is All the Pope's Saints, and it's a great way to understand Pope Francis better. But it also helps me understand how these saints and how Jesuit spirituality impacts the life of someone who is not Pope, for example. Right. more of an average person. And I like too that you organize the book based on the different concepts, I guess you could say, that each of these saints represent. So trust and openness and generosity and simplicity. So the table of contents is not just, St. Francis Xavier here, St. Peter Faber, whatever the case may be. It's chapter 2 is trust. Chapter 3 is openness. Chapter 4 is generosity. And then we have simplicity, dedication, gratitude. I like that because that shows the different elements that are really important to shaping this particular papacy. And then you bring in the saints who inspire these different elements.
Yeah, in a homily on the Feast of St. Ignatius, Pope Francis once preached about the Jesuit seal, which is the IHS monogram surrounded by a sunburst with the 3 nails of Christ in the middle. And the IHS, as he writes, means Jesus hominum salvator, Jesus, Savior of men. And for Jesuits, the Pope points out that this is having the centrality of Christ. This is having Jesus at the center of our lives. And the goal of Ignatian spirituality is to kind of take ourselves out of the center and live a life that's centered more on Christ rather than on our own desires. It's not about sort of building up a false self in a negative psychological sense and kind of pushing your true self away, but it's sort of allowing your true self to emerge and to say, I'm not the creator of the universe. I'm not the controller of everything around me. And so that central virtue of humility, everything else flows from that. So looking at saints of simplicity, saints like St. Alphonsus Rodriguez, who was a simple doorkeeper in Spain and lived a very simple and quiet life, was a widower when he joined the Jesuits, 40 years old. His wife and children had died, and then went on to live this extraordinary life where he would just have simple spiritual conversations with people, inspiring another saint, Peter Claver, to travel to South America and become the slave of the slaves forever, laboring in Cartagena with the slaves who were being processed from Africa. So this is the kind of stuff I talk about in the book. And I kind of end with a prayer exercise looking at a Gospel of John passage on the sort of the 3 times Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? And sort of inviting the reader at the end to kind of enter into that with his or her imagination and sort of pray through that in an Ignatian fashion. But the point of the book isn't so much sort of providing an instruction manual so much as kind of just saying, here it is. This is the way people have lived who have followed this spirituality. This is the way saints in the Jesuit order have tried to live simplicity. We've heard a lot about Pope Francis and his simplicity, the way he tries to live his life, riding in simple cars rather than limousines. Dedication, saints like the North American martyrs who were willing to go back into Indian territory even when they knew they would die. And so it's not so much about puffing up the Jesuit order and making it seem like, we're the greatest or we're the best or anything like that, but it's kind of showing the ideals that we strive to live in our lives. And I hope that gives some people a bit of an insight into Pope Francis.
Yeah, and that is exactly what I love about this book. It is All the Pope's Saints by my guest here, Sean Salai. You can find it Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever you buy your books, All the Pope's Saints. And yeah, I really like this, Sean, because you said at the beginning of the interview that Pope Francis doesn't feel like that much of an enigma to you. But I was just talking to some Catholic friends the other night, and we were talking, and my husband agreed that we often find ourselves kind of baffled by Pope Francis. But what I know from my friends who are familiar with the Jesuit saints and the Jesuit order, they find him less of a mystery. They just say, if you look at the Jesuit saints throughout history, the Jesuit order, it's not that surprising the way he's managing things, the way he's managing people, the way this papacy is going. He is just coming at things from, you very much see his Jesuit background come into play. And what are some of the things that you've seen Pope Francis sort of do or say, or the way he approaches things that you, as a Jesuit yourself, Sean, would say, yeah, that seems familiar to me as a Jesuit, as someone who's familiar with the Jesuit order, even though to someone on the outside that might seem a little surprising or a little different?
Sure. Well, I would say he prays before he acts, and he really discerns. We talk about discernment in the Society of Jesus a lot. So it's not so much about responding to a situation with kind of the stock answer or the knee-jerk answer, but it's really sitting with something and trying to get a sense of where the Lord is leading and where Christ is leading. And sometimes that can come off in an off-the-cuff fashion, but it's still emerging from this place of prayer and discernment. So what that means is, in a pastoral situation, the Pope can say something that seems a little bit different or odd to some people, but you have to kind of look at it in the context. I had the privilege of reviewing another book recently, What Pope Francis Really Said, by Tom Hoops, and Tom is very good at taking kind of the different contexts for statements the Pope has made in the news and kind of providing documentation and saying, well, this is what the Pope really meant. In this book, I'm kind of looking more at what's at the heart of Pope Francis. All the Pope's saints is really about the saints that he would have learned as a Jesuit, some of whom he himself has canonized, like St. Peter Faber. And what is it to be radically Christ-centered? That means that whenever I make a decision in my life or whenever I act or do something, I need to check with Christ. And maybe the answer will surprise me sometimes. So it's a real openness to not approaching everything status quo and sort of just entering into the media wars and kind of putting everything through a PR agency and giving the stock answers. But it's kind of trying to really reach out and listen to people and walk with people and accompany people, and to do that in a way that's led by Christ rather than our own egos. And so that's one thing that Pope Francis, his humility, his dedication, his simplicity, I hope that the saints in this book kind of show the source of that.
Yeah, and that is one thing that many people know about Jesuit spirituality is this emphasis on discernment. Obviously, many people know the Ignatian, the reflections that you're supposed to do at the end of the day and that sort of thing. I know a lot of people who follow that Ignatian reflection practice, and so certainly Ignatian spirituality and Jesuit spirituality is known for this kind of discernment. And so it's interesting that you say that you see that in Pope Francis's life, because I think that people think of him as just saying things without forethought, just like a reporter asks him a question and he just says something and then it makes world headlines. But you're saying that even though his responses might be quick in the moment, if he's, talking to a reporter on a plane, as he is wont to do, that this is probably something that he has actually deeply discerned as a Jesuit, that's something that would be very much part of the fabric of his spirituality. And that even if his answer is quick in the moment, it is probably coming from a place of deep discernment. Is that a correct summary there?
Yes, I think so. It's really coming from a larger framework of prayer, discernment, and experience, walking with the poor, going to visit people in prisons and nursing homes and hospitals, as Pope Francis has continued to do as Pope.
Yeah, it's really interesting to get this kind of insight into Pope Francis, and I really love the book, and also I discovered some new saints that I wasn't as familiar with their background, and these people are so interesting. I mean, especially a lot of the Jesuit saints. The Jesuits came about in the 1500s. Is that correct, Sean?
That's right.
Yeah, so the saints, the Jesuit saints to me always feel a little more modern, a little more relatable than, let's say, some of the saints who lived in the year 600 or something, and we hardly really know anything about them. The Jesuit saints a lot of them lived relatively recently in time, so they kind of more have that modern mindset that people living today can relate to. So I love the concept behind the book. We're about out of time, but this has been very illuminating for me. And Sean, tell us again where people can find more of your writing, more of your work, and what your great new book is called.
Sure. Well, I'm a special contributor to America Magazine, so you can find me at America Magazine online. And All the Pope's Saints is available from our Sunday Visitor. it's been an honor talking to you about the book, and I hope that people find that this book invites them into deeper relationship with God and engagement with the world rather than running away from the world, as you were alluding to there.
Yeah, I love that. All right, well, Sean, keep up the great work, and I really appreciate you joining me here today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen.
All right, take care.